Everybody, welcome back. These are the horror films that we loved of 1961. Join me as we celebrate the horror movies that scared us all back in 1961. I'm Tony, you're watching Yesteryear, and today, let's get started. Coming up, we have is Atlantis, the Lost Continent, adventure, sci-fi, and horror. Welcome to Atlantis, where royal guardsmen wear uniforms that could easily be from the wardrobe of Ming the Merciless. And some unfortunate slaves are turned into bovine-headed beasts. Atlantis. Next up we have is The Beast of Yucca Flats. A defecting Soviet scientist is hit by a nuclear explosion near Yucca Flats and roams around as a beast. The Beast of Yucca Flats is horror, sci-fi, and does not disappoint. Bloodlust, horror and thriller. A crazed hunter kidnaps people and turns them loose on his private estate, where he hunts them for sport. Bloodlust, horror and thriller. Remember the Gilligan's Island had an episode of Bloodlust. Dr. Blood's Coffin. People are mysteriously disappearing near a remote Cornish village, where a scientist is experimenting, reviving the dead. Dr. Blood's Coffin is horror, sci-fi, and thriller. A lot of kills, some jump scares, some comedy. This movie's good. El Mundo de los Vampiros. The World of Vampires. This movie is a Spanish movie, Mexican movie. A vampire uses two sisters to seek revenge from the last member of a family that persecuted the vampires in Europe. El Mundo de los Vampiros. The World of Vampires. Flight that disappeared. A cross-country airliner whose passengers include a nuclear physicist, a rocket expert, and a mathematical genius is drawn beyond radar range by an unknown unbreakable force. Flight that disappeared is mystery, fantasy, sci-fi, homicidal, horror, mystery, and thriller. The brutal stabbing murder of a justice of the peace sparks an investigation of dark family secrets in a sleepy small town in Southern California. Homicidal. Next up we have for 1961 is Honeymoon of Terror. Horror and thriller. A couple honeymoons on a deserted isle called Thunder Island. When the husband leaves the island to go for supplies, the wife finds that the island isn't as deserted as they thought it was. Honeymoon of Terror. Horror and thriller. Conga. Dr. Decker comes back from Africa. During 1 year, he came across a way of growing plants and animals to enormous size. He brings back a gorilla and grows the gorilla to enormous size. Conga. Horror, sci-fi, and thriller. Next up we have is Werewolf in a Girls' Dormitory. Comedy, horror, and mystery. At a girls' school, several students are murdered by a snarling wolfman-like creature. Suspicion falls upon a newly arrived teacher. Werewolf in a Girls' Dormitory. This movie is funny, campy, and scary. The Mask. Horror and thriller. A young archaeologist thinks he is cursed by a mask that makes him have strange nightmares. Before committing suicide, he sends the mask to a psychiatrist who soon plunges into the masks and dies. The Mask. Master of the World. In 1868, an American scientist and his team become hostages of fanatical pacifist Rober, who uses his airship Albatross to destroy military targets on Earth. Master of the World. Adventure, sci-fi, and horror. Ring of Terror. Drama and horror. A group of medical students undertake some silly and frightening endeavors in order to pledge a fraternity. So there's killing, horror, suspense, Light comedy, Ring of Terror will not disappoint. Santo vs. Infernal Men. El Santo helps undercover agent take down a gang of drug smugglers. El Santo was lucha libre. El Santo was the best masked wrestler that made horror movies. El Santo. Next up we have is The Dead One. A voodoo priestess sends out zombies to bring back live victims for her sacrificial rituals. The Dead One. This movie is campy, but it's horror. Some jump scares, some kills. Check out The Dead One. Next up we have is The Shadow of the Cat. A house cat sees her mistress murdered by two servants under orders from her husband and becomes ferociously bent on revenge. The Shadow of the Cat is a horror, mystery, and thriller. This movie will not disappoint. A lot of scares and kills. Dead Eyes of London is a crime, horror, and mystery movie. Wealthy, heavily insured men are being murdered at an alarming rate. Scotland Yard investigates and finds clues that lead to a ring of blind men led by a mysterious reverend. Dead Eyes of London. The Curse of Nostradamus. An aristocratic vampire swears an oath to kill the enemies who killed his father. In order to terrify them even further, he warns each one when he is coming for them. Oh, how spooky. The Curse of Nostradamus. Crime, drama, and horror. The Curse of the Werewolf. In 18th century Spain, an adopted boy becomes a werewolf and terrorizes the inhabitants of his town. The Curse of the Werewolf is a scary movie, thriller, mystery, some light comedy, but it's a horror movie nonetheless for 1961. Next up we have is The Devil's Hand, horror movie. A man is haunted by visions of a beautiful woman. When he finally meets her, he winds up involved in a satanic cult. This movie is exquisite. It has scares, kills, and good dialogue. The Naked Witch. It's not about a witch that's naked. A student researching the German settlement of Central Texas unearths the grave of a reputed witch. The witch comes to life and starts killing people, casting spells. The Naked Witch. Does she roam around the village naked? You have to watch the movie for The Naked Witch. The Innocents. A young governess for two children become convinced that the house and grounds are haunted. This movie is spooky, fun, exciting, and it's a horror movie. The Innocents, released in 1961. Check it out if you haven't already. I highly recommend The Innocents. The Phantom Planet. After an invisible asteroid draws an astronaut and his ship to its surface, he is miniaturized by the Phantom's planet exotic atmosphere. So an invisible asteroid crashes, and then the atmosphere turns them into miniature people. Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea is a classic. When the Earth is threatened by a burning Van Allen radiation belt, U.S. Navy Admiral Nelson plans to shoot a nuclear missile at the belt. Action, adventure, and sci-fi. Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea will not disappoint. Next up we have is Creature from the Haunted Sea, almost like Creature from the Black Lagoon. A crook decides to bump off members of his inept crew and blame their deaths on a legendary sea creature. Legend of the Creature from the Black Lagoon. What he doesn't know is that the creature is real. Muñecos Infernales. Little dolls. 4 men are cursed by a voodoo priest for stealing a sacred idol from his temple. Soon a band of murderous doll men are after the men and their families. So you mess with the dolls, a voodoo curse will come get you. Those are the horror movies of 1961. What movies do you remember of 1961 that scared you at that time? Were there any movies that I left out? Let me know. I'm Tony. Thanks for joining me. If you haven't already, click subscribe, hit that notification bell. And thanks for joining me here at Yesteryear and Today. And we'll see you all real soon in the next video.